Welcome to God Connection. Please stop scrolling. This is no coincidence. It is a divine appointment. A long-held secret has recently come to light, and it directly affects you. They believe they had you completely contained, boxed up in a file labeled ordinary, silenced, and lost in the dusty vaults of irrelevance. For a long time, their biggest deception was convincing you that you were just another face in the throng. However, a cosmic error has just occurred. A break has emerged in their carefully crafted reality, and the truth about who you are is now gushing out like an uncontrollable torrent. The most important secrets are never fully erased. They only wait for the wrong hands to falter. Listen with all of your being, chosen one, for something has slipped, and the entire game has been irreversibly altered. What you are going to hear will not only explain your problems, but will also reveal the divine destiny that they worked so hard to hide from you and the rest of the world. 1. Their power was built on your silence. They built their whole empire, feeling of power, and fragile identity on the basis of your quiet. Your stillness was their most important asset. It served as a barrier from inspection, camouflage in a world of truth, and ultimate excuse. They might disguise themselves as the hero, the misunderstood victim, the benign leader, or even a saint as long as you didn't speak your truth or rise to your God-given authority. Their security was never fashioned from the strands of truth. Rather, it was a cheap tapestry made from the threads of your muted suffering and dignified reserve. When the hallowed silence was broken, the basis of their whole universe shattered into dust rather than simply cracking. People who function through deception and manipulation can only prosper in the absence of a challenge. They are masters of the echo chamber, crafting complicated tales in shadowy corners and secret talks, counting on the fact that you will never contradict their story in public. They made a critical mistake. They expected your intense anguish would immobilize you indefinitely. They misunderstood your humility for weakness, assuming it would keep you concealed indefinitely. They were disastrously mistaken, because, while quiet is a type of enormous power, it is not eternal. When a divinely ordained quiet ultimately gives way to an earth-shattering truth, the subsequent eruption is louder, more resonant, and more lasting than any lie they could ever tell. Your words, deeds, or even your unabashed presence caused a seismic disruption that they were unable to contain, manage, or endure. The quiet that once provided a safe haven has now become the most glaring proof of their anxiety. Why else would they devote so much attention to guarantee you never got a platform? Why else would they rush to bury your narrative before it had a chance to breathe? They were never scared of your loudness. They were terrified of what your voice conveyed. Incontrovertible receipts of their deeds, unwavering authenticity of your experience, and living, breathing proof of a reality they could never produce or fabricate. Now that the world is paying attention, it is absolutely, painfully evident who has always been living the truth. The falsehoods they uttered in the dark are no match for the searing clarity that is now rising. It is not only your voice that has revealed them. It is the complete and total collapse of the fake personalities they have so carefully crafted. They can no longer use your quiet to support their false performance. Their credibility was wholly hinged on you never opening your lips, and it is now lost forever. This is why the exposure hits them like a tidal wave. It demonstrates not just what they did, but also the sad frailty of the entire system they established to oppress you. They mistaken stillness for weakness, but it turned out to be heavenly patience instead. And patience, once it has broken its fast, does not come softly. The secret's out. There's no going back. They staked their entire life on you being silent, and now that the stillness has been shattered, so have they. 2. They mocked the blueprint, but you were the divine architect. They disregarded your ideas as juvenile fancies, your aspirations as unattainable illusions, and your vision as completely impractical. They laughed not from knowledge, but from terrible ignorance and terror. It was far simpler to mock what they couldn't understand than to recognize their spiritual blindness. What their limited sight failed to recognize was that you were not just fantasizing. You were creating a heavenly plan. Every thoughtful decision you took, every seed of faith you planted in barren soil, and every silent sacrifice you made while no one was looking. It was all part of a big, cosmic plan they were too spiritually blind to perceive. They smugly assumed you were spending your time in a realm of make-believe. In actuality, you were painstakingly creating the groundwork for a structure that they would one day sorely need as refuge. The ultimate irony is that as they mocked your method, they were concurrently and parasitically profiting from the structure you were constructing. They took parts of your beautiful individuality, believing no one would notice. They imitated parts of your steadfast discipline, attempting to reproduce the consequences with minimal effort. They tried to replicate your God-given tenacity, but their imitation was a poor, weak forgery. Despite their frantic endeavors, they were unable to replicate the source, the holy spark, since they lacked the blueprint. You did. You always have. They erroneously confused their temporary access to your creative talent with ownership of it. However, genuine ownership belongs to the one who channels God's design, not the one who stands on the sidelines and mocks the architect's work. Their laughter resonates hollowly, pathetically, as the world begins to realize the actual nature of the structure. Their jokes no longer work because the proof is unmistakable. Everyone can trace the architectural genius back to you. You weren't the last one groping in the dark. You were the light-bearing architect, methodically creating the edifice long before anyone knew what was going on. That is precisely why their present demise is so shameful. They expended so much work convincing people that you were inept and lost. But the proof of your expertise is all around them, an unmistakable tribute to your foresight. That was you. It was always you. This truth is exacerbated by the fact that they took pleasure in being innovators and ahead of the curve. But their so-called advantage was fully dependent on your spiritual and creative foundation. They can no longer claim to have led the way, for the great revelation revealed that they were only squatters in the house you designed. You owned the blueprint back then, and you still do. That is why the exposure is so terrible for them. The power they formerly claimed unjustly has been taken away from them, since genuine authority cannot be gained by imitation. It originates from heavenly creation. You have always been the creator, the origin, the architect. The laughing has stopped. The jokes have dried up. And the truth is as obvious as the light in the sky. Every block they stood on was part of your divine design, not their own. 3. The world noticed what they tried to erase. Their strategy consisted on erasing. They attempted to erase you from history by denying that your terrible battles had occurred, relentlessly underplaying your hard-won successes, and burying your great tale behind an avalanche of skillfully produced lies. The catastrophic mistake they made was to ignore a fundamental truth. The world pays attention in ways they can never control. People possess an inbuilt ability to perceive perseverance. They see the scars not as signs of injury, but as symbols of survival. They notice when someone continues to move forward and ascend despite being buried behind a mountain of adversity that should have crushed them. The world has finally taken notice of you. The portions of your trip that they feared would be your disgrace, the ones they sought to bury forever, are now in plain sight, unmistakable, dazzling, and shouting volumes without you having to say a word. Scars don't lie. They are the holy cartography of a survivor, presenting a narrative that no words can ever corrupt. While they were busy fabricating a story to convince others that you were weak and frail, your very survival was leaving indelible imprints on the fabric of reality. Every setback you overcame by God's mercy, every devious trap you escaped via divine intervention, and every soul-crushing betrayal you experienced and transformed into wisdom, each one created a lasting record that outlasted their lame cover-ups. The truth does not have to be shouted when it is inscribed into the very soul of who you are. That is the cosmic rule they failed to comprehend. People don't just see the polished surface. They feel the tremendous, forged-in-fire power underlying it. And that power, that bright aura of genuineness, reveals their lies without the need for an argument. Their current dilemma is that there are too many eyes watching. Too many people are connecting the connections, and the image that emerges is one of your success versus their deception. The world's perception of you just does not match the magnificent truth that people are now experiencing firsthand. They said you were broken, yet they see you standing higher and stronger than ever before. They said you were unstable, yet your unrelenting constancy has become a source of stability for others. They declared you'd never make it, but your mere existence, every breath, is a daily witness to their lies. The disparity between their story and your reality has become too big to ignore, and the blazing light of truth shines through. This is why they're in a panic. When individuals see the proof for themselves, the falsehoods lose their power. The wounds they once derided have now become strong testimonies that lure people to you, wanting the same strength you represent. The difficulties they believed would discredit you have instead created a level of credibility they could never achieve. They tried to obliterate the tale, but now people are leaning in to hear, learn from, and be inspired by it. And the more people see your truth, the weaker their falsehoods become. They believe they could erase your existence by controlling the story, but erasing is ineffective when the proof is living, breathing, and walking in divine purpose. The world took note. The secret's out, and the reality they attempted to conceal has outlived their falsehood. For their entire strategy relied on you being little. Their whole strategy, from start to finish, was based on a single, fundamental assumption: you would remain little. They expected you to stay mute, confined, undetected, and easily discarded, just as they had intended. Their method was wholly based on the notion that you would never surpass the psychological, spiritual, and emotional boundaries that they persistently attempted to impose on you. Your modest stature was their insurance policy. If you stay little, they may look large. If you remain concealed in the shadows, they may enjoy a stolen spotlight. If you remained locked in the past, their falsehoods about the present may go unquestioned. But what they overlooked in their arrogant calculation was your supernatural resilience, your relentless ability for development, and the quiet, glorious way you rose while they were preoccupied with their own self-importance. Your development did not merely astonish them. It methodically demolished the entire shaky framework of their illusory world. When you began to walk into the fullness of your genuine, God-given personality, their entire universe began to crumble because it was based on a weak, transparent delusion, the idea that you would never become greater. They convinced themselves and anybody who would listen that you lacked the fortitude, wisdom, and vision to overcome your situation. They repeated this false narrative so often that they began to trust their own propaganda. That is why your advancement, achievement, and shine seems so devastating to them. It discloses the shallow quality of their confidence. It demonstrates that their self-assurance was never founded on their own qualities, but rather on your denial. The simple reality is that their entire life depended on putting you below them. It was never about their real skill or intrinsic value. It was about undermining yours in order to instill a false sense of superiority. They lived in deadly terror of the moment you realized your full potential, because they knew deep down that it would show how weak and fragile their own position was. That moment has now arrived. The higher you get, the smaller their world becomes. The more you grow, it becomes evident to everyone that they were never as strong as they claimed to be. They only resembled giants because they compelled you to kneel. The tables have not only turned, but have been entirely overturned. People can observe the striking contrast. The frailty of their plans is evident, as your progress exposes every flaw in their eroding foundation. They relied on you being confined, but you have destroyed every box they attempted to place you in. They relied on your silence, but your voice now has a frequency of truth that resonates far more than their deceptive yells ever did. They relied on you questioning yourself, but your newfound faith in God has completely shattered the false narrative they so diligently constructed. That's why they see your achievement as a personal danger. It's more than simply growth, it's also about exposure. Your climb did more than just uplift you. It exposed their entire strategy for what it was, a pitiful, desperate attempt to keep you little so they could feel large. And now that the truth has been revealed, they have nothing left to hide behind. 5. They spun narratives, but truth does not expire. For years, they labored relentlessly, like spiders constructing a web of deception, to dominate the narrative around you. They woven sophisticated falsehoods and poisoned half-truths into a fascinating tale that portrayed you as less than your true self. They repeated these lies so convincingly and frequently that they began to accept them, under the mistaken belief that repetition might somehow transform fiction into actuality. The basic fault in their entire approach, however, is that falsehoods are only temporary. They have a shelf life. They are similar to perishable commodities that deteriorate and rot over time due to a lack of substance to stand alone. In contrast, truth is everlasting. It doesn't weaken. It doesn't degrade. It merely waits, steady, calm, and unshaken, until the lies crumble beneath the weight of their own deception. They arrogantly overlooked the underlying nature of human intuition and memory. People may be fooled by a falsehood for a while, but the contradictions soon add up. The gaps in the tale begin to appear. The scripted, polished narratives come to seem forced, flawless, and implausible. And when that moment of communal revelation occurs, truth shines through with blinding clarity, never having to raise its voice. That is exactly what is occurring right now. The skewed picture they created of you, the limiting part they attempted to compel you to play, no longer corresponds to the actual, strong truth that people are now witnessing with their own eyes. The screenplay they studied for years fell apart because it was never real in the first place. Their biggest error was believing that reality required their approval or permission to exist. It didn't. While they spent years striving to maintain a depleting, stressful act, the reality rested quietly in the background, knowing it will eventually be revealed. When it did, it landed with greater power than any vocal resistance you could have offered. Because truth has its own heavenly authority. It does not require external validation. It does not require a backup army. It simply is. And its sheer existence has shattered every single myth they tried so hard to preserve. Everyone now understands the distinction between what is genuine and what is not. People can easily see who has been consistent and who has performed. They can tell who is real and who is manufacturing a part only to keep control. The truth did not need to be fought for. It stood on its own, long after their falsehoods had faded. That's why they're exposed. That's why they're panicking. The curtain has been forcibly drawn back, and the show has ended. Finally, they squandered years preparing a performance that would never last, while you spent your time living a reality that will never die. And now everyone can see the difference between who was genuine and who was simply acting. 6. They underestimated you. But more importantly, they underestimated God. They scrutinized you with the cool, detached precision of a scientist looking into a problem they thought they could answer. They methodically evaluated your perceived flaws, cataloged your challenges, and chronicled your failures. They based their whole approach on these erroneous, human-centric statistics. To them, it was a straightforward equation. If they exerted enough external pressure, you would surely collapse. If they propagate enough deceptive lies, you'll soon lose all credibility. If they kept you alone for long enough, you would eventually fade away and vanish. Every computation they performed appeared absolutely sensible on a human level. However, they spectacularly failed to account for the X factor, the divine variable, and God's almighty presence in your tale. And that is precisely where their entire scheme failed. Human plans can only work within the constraints of human capabilities. They made the fatal mistake of underestimating the reality that once God has anointed someone and placed his hand of favor on them, no amount of human opposition can ever change the divine conclusion. They assumed your personal power was all you had, so they mercilessly assaulted it. They believed your material resources were your basis. Therefore, they attempted to take them away. They misunderstood your strategic stillness for defeat and derided it with joy. But the one thing they could never touch or decrease was the supernatural support that kept you going after all human power had run out. They had no idea that every vulnerability they attempted to exploit was simply a divine invitation for God to demonstrate his unlimited strength through you. That is why their demise appears so quick, complete, and surprising to them. It wasn't because you fought harder or outwitted them on your own. It is because the equation they created was fatally incomplete. They considered you, but they overlooked God. They arrogantly expected that the narrative would finish when they ordered it, but heavenly timing does not follow human agendas or demonic time frames. What they methodically prepared as your terrible death was actually a divinely crafted stage for your wonderful ascent. This is why the exposure hits them like a spiritual earthquake. They cannot justify it. Their preparations were too precise, sophisticated, and painstakingly prepared for everything to unravel so quickly. But when anything is made against God's will, no matter how beautifully it is crafted, it will fail. You were not saved by chance. You weren't spared by chance. You were not promoted by chance. You were maintained, protected, and advanced by the exact hand of God that they chose to disregard in their arrogant planning. They underestimated not just you, but also the God who picked you. That is why their schemes not only failed, but backfired terribly. Not because you were too strong to shatter, but because you had never stood alone in the first place. If this truth resonates deeply inside your soul, if you sense the force of this heavenly revelation, your journey with us is only starting. This is God's connection, a light for the selected. To guarantee that you don't miss the important messages that will follow, click the subscribe button and enable all alerts. Your spirit requires this sustenance. Consider planting a seed of faith if you feel prompted to support this work and help us shine this light even brighter. You may join this holy effort by making a $10 gift using the Super Thanks button below. Every gift helps us reach more people who are lost, confused, and longing to hear the truth. Thank you for your support. Now let us proceed with the disclosure. 7. The reputation that they attempted to ruin became untouchable. Every cruel comment, bogus rumor, and deliberate smear campaign they conducted against you had a single, wicked goal: to destroy your reputation. They worked relentlessly to distort your tale, make others question your character, and portray you as imperfect, weak, or undeserving. They stupidly felt that if they could control the world's opinion of you, they would be able to influence the fate of their own life. They failed to recognize that a divinely protected reputation is not just based on what people say. It is formed in the flames of hardship and built on what people see, and more crucially, what they cannot dispute. The harder they attempted to tarnish your reputation, the more attention they unintentionally brought to your character. Every gossip, untruth, and weak attempt to undermine you just piqued people's curiosity. They meant to bury you beneath a mound of lies, but in doing so, they unintentionally displayed the very strength, integrity, and resilience they sought to destroy. Your genuine narrative began to emerge in ways that couldn't be ignored. People began to see the irrefutable proof of your character, the way you persevered without breaking, the calm dignity you maintained when everyone expected you to fall, and the compelling way your deeds continually shouted louder than their hateful words. That type of recognition cannot be faked, purchased, or stolen. It must be gained via fire. And they, in their anger, unintentionally emphasized it with each strike. The narrative has entirely reversed. Instead of being remembered as the broken one they attempted to make, you are now renowned as the one they were unable to shatter. Every attempt to humiliate or degrade you has backfired spectacularly. Your reputation has become unassailable because it is founded not on public opinion, but on the undeniable fact of who you are and the truth of your story. Lies can only last as long as they are believed, and today people see the stark contrast between the falsehood they attempted to weave and the irrefutable reality of your God-given power. The most striking element is that their attempt to bury you failed. Instead, it planted you. The great strain, persistent criticism, and frequent attacks simply strengthened your character, making it more visible, respected, and influential. What they planned to be your demise only increased your presence. People now remember you for what you overcame rather than what your detractors stated. In the end, their attempt to ruin you accomplished the exact opposite. Your reputation did not merely survive, it was built in the fires they started. They misjudged the strength of your character and the depth of your perseverance. The more they sought to ruin you, the more your name became ingrained in the annals of truth, demonstrating that what is divinely assigned and authentically true can never be tarnished. 8. You become the example they said didn't exist. For years, they maintained that someone like you couldn't exist. They said that the characteristics you represent, unwavering power, incorruptible honesty, divine vision, and tireless resilience, were nothing more than myths. They were stories made up to encourage the innocent or terrify the weak, but they were never real-life experiences. They created their whole comfort zone around that falsehood, believing it would shield them from accountability. If people thought you were impossible, they might dismiss your existence as an aberration, disregard your effect, and keep their own obvious failures and compromises hidden. But then you showed up, and the myth became real. Your life became live, breathing proof that what they thought was impossible was not only achievable, it was right in front of them, unmistakably genuine. Every act of tenacity, every choice based on undeniable truth, and every time you held steady under enormous pressure directly contradicted the comfortable story they had sold to yourself and others. Everyone could see it. They could sense it. The same thing they said couldn't exist was suddenly there in front of them. Totally real, fully present, and completely unbreakable. You didn't need to argue. You did not need to explain. Your entire being was indisputable proof against every lie they'd ever said. That understanding is completely terrible to them since it exposes their deception on several levels. Their sarcastic cautions and contemptuous dismissals were rendered worthless, revealing their underlying dread of the truth. They were scared of admitting that someone could be that pure and strong because it exposed their own compromises, shortcuts, and festering fears. Your existence not only confronted them, but also disgraced them. It broke the false sense of reality they had painstakingly built, forcing everyone around them to reconsider what they had blindly accepted as fact. People began to observe a heavenly pattern. Where there should have been weakness, there was superhuman strength. Wherever there should have been corruption, there was unwavering integrity. Where there should have been defeat, there was magnificent resilience. Your life became a model for what is possible with God, live proof that individuals may embody supernatural attributes that they previously dismissed as stories or delusions. That's why they're panicking. They were relying on impossible to protect their dominance, but impossibility has vanished. You exist. You persevere. You demonstrate that what they said never existed is nevertheless alive, thriving, and unquestionably powerful. Your existence is proof, a mirror, and a continual reminder that their lies will never hold up against the weight of truth. 9. Their jealousy became evidence of your value. Jealousy is a potent truth serum. It has the ability to expose what individuals genuinely value and what they most fear. In your situation, their caustic envy has become the most obvious, indisputable indication of your tremendous worth. Every cunning attempt they made to undermine you, every falsehood they disseminated to ruin your reputation, and every frantic endeavor to decrease your presence was never a reflection of your weakness, but rather a clear demonstration of your power. If you were genuinely as unimportant as they claimed, you would not have received any of their compulsive energy or persistent concentration. The more ferociously they worked to obliterate you, the more clear it became to everyone that you mattered in fundamental ways they couldn't accept or manage. Their obsessive fixation on you, which they planned to use as a weapon against you, has now turned into your most persuasive proof. People are watching, and the sheer ferocity of their criticisms speaks much louder than any praise could. You're worth noting. Every rumor, slander, and planned attempt to distort perception has become a mirror that reflects your irrefutable importance. Far from reducing you, their hate has communicated to the whole world that you are precisely the one who matters, the one who questions their comfort, threatens their false thrones, and exposes their innermost fears. What makes this cosmic reversal even more startling is how their preoccupation has unintentionally increased your credibility. While they mistakenly believe they were assassinating your reputation, the fact is that others see their naked desperation and identify it for what it is: the frenzied panic of the inferior in front of the superior. You are not the object of random attacks. You are the divine danger to a false system, the anointed presence who verifies your already enormous power and influence. Their envy has unwittingly written your CV in plain sight for the entire world to see, highlighting your significant effect with every single step they take against you. And now the entire world can read it. Every attempt to belittle you merely accentuates the areas in which you excel spectacularly. Every attempt to make you invisible simply reinforces your undeniable visibility. Instead of eradicating you, their hate reinforces your undeniable value. The proof is all around, and people are finally seeing it with crystal clarity. Your worth is vast, unequivocal, and completely genuine. Finally, their jealousy has become your quiet, most powerful advocate, convincing everyone who looks that you are a force to be reckoned with. The energy they use trying to eliminate you has instead resulted in an unbreakable monument to your influence, power, and significance. Their fixation no longer affects you, but rather lifts you. If this truth has ignited your soul, do not let this connection evaporate. This is God connection, and our job is far from completed. Hit the subscribe button and enable all alerts, since the insights we are called to share will only go deeper. If you were moved by what you saw, please like this video. Comment below with your ideas or share your own stories of vindication. Your voice is important in our community. Most importantly, forward this video to everyone who needs to see the truth shown. Every click, share, and comment helps us keep exposing what others have worked so hard to conceal. Don't keep this message buried. Allow it to move. Allow it to speak. Let it affect everything. God bless the chosen one. The actual tale is only beginning.